Okay. So there have been some questions about the basketball court. So, and I think this is, a good way to talk about drawing, and I think it's a good way of talking about layers, right? So I'm going to, I'll draw the basketball court in class today, and I'll talk about how I go about it, and then to kind of further our discussion on layers, I'll layer it today as well, okay? And actually, let's see, hold on one second. I've got, oh, there it is. Where did it go? Okay. Here is our workbook. And I'm going to flip down to it's a long book. 214, right? There we go. Okay. So here's our basketball court. I'm going to rotate view clockwise. And so one thing I want to, before we get started on this, I want to remind you is, hold on, let me see if I can open this up a second session of this. Okay. I want to remind you a little bit about pen weights and layers, right? We talked about layers, and I'm going to further define them, but one of the biggest, one of the biggest characteristics that you'll use in layers in AutoCAD will be for pen weights, right? And we talked about pen weights last week. I'm going to go all the way to the end of this workbook, and I'm going to come here and look at this line weight chart. Rotate clockwise here, okay? And I want to remind you that layers are color dependent in AutoCAD. And so that means that different colors represent different pen thicknesses printed, okay? So that means that color number 1, pen number 1, when we are in AutoCAD, and I'm just going to open up a blank template file here, click. I'm going to change my units to architectural. All right, we'll do that. We'll do everything nice and correct, right? There we go. I'm going to open up my layer properties dialog box here. I want to remind you that when I, create a new layer, and we'll give it a name, we'll just leave it layer 1 for now, but the color right here, when I click on that, when I say color number 1, pen number 1, it is red, because as I hover over that, you're going to see it says index color 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So color number 1 may be red, right? But when it actually prints physically out on a piece of paper or on a PDF with a PDF as a digital file, this is what it's going to look like printed, right? Which is very much different than color number 8, which is a very thin pen weight, right? So pen number 8 is going to be this gray color, right? So if I want a thick pen weight, I'm going to choose red, and if I want a thin pen weight, I'm going to choose, gray, okay? So when I look at this basketball court like this, right, you may have noticed, you may have not noticed. If you didn't notice, you can resubmit this. It's totally fine. But you may not have noticed that it says create the following layers. And we'll do this today. We'll talk about it a little bit more, right? You didn't have all the tools to complete this assignment last week, so I get it. It's fine. We'll create some layers, and then we will assign them a pen weight. It's part of creating layers, assigning a pen weight. And when I look at this, it really doesn't say, hey, use red, yellow, green, or blue, right? But I can visually look at this and say, well, there's a very thick, heavy pen weight on the outer perimeter. There's kind of a medium weight on these free throw areas, right? I don't know the correct terminology, I'll be honest. And then we have a very thin pen weight here at the, the center court lines, okay? So I can just look at it and analyze it that way and say, well, I have a very heavy, I have a medium, and I have a light. And you're like, well, is that a medium or is that a heavy, right? Well, I'm going to look at them all compared to one another, right? So I'm going to look at this and say, well, this is very much the lightest, and this one is thinner than this one, so that deems it medium, right? In another circumstance where I had some different, some different lines, this could very well be a heavy pen weight for that drawing, right? And this could almost be a medium, and then we could have something that is thinner than that. But I'm looking at these things in terms of, their relationship to one another, okay? So when it says, when I look at this and it says create all these different layers, and then, essentially by visually looking this, it's asking us to assign a pen weight. That's how I'm going to determine the pen weights for this, just this specific instance. So I'm going to look at my pen weight chart, and I'm going to see maybe this is a very heavy pen, pen number 1, and then maybe pen number 4 is a medium, and then pen number 8 is a light, right? Or you could do pen number 1, pen number 3, and pen number 5, right? I'm mostly looking for a gradient between heavy, medium, and light, not necessarily that you got, you know, pen number 1, 5, and 8, okay? All right, so I'm going to draw this basketball court, but I'm going to create a few layers first, all right? And I'm going to just start over here real quick. This is, I guess this exercise is going to kind of just illustrate the whole gamut of our skills so far with layers, right? Yep.
Do you want us to dimension the basketball court?
No. Nope, no dimensions. Not yet, at least. Soon enough. All right, so I've created a new drawing. I'm going to save it first because, you know, you never know when somebody's going to hit your power cord with a vacuum and your computer's going to turn off and you're going to lose your work. So I'm going to go to AutoCAD and I'm going to call this basketball court. I'm going to hit save. All right, so I'm going to deal with the layers first, and as I deal with the layers, I'll explain them a little bit more as we go, okay, and then we'll draw the basketball court. But I want to remind you that, you know, layers organize things in AutoCAD. Layers allow you to print different pen weights, and they also allow you to visually manipulate things on the screen. So I can turn things on, I can turn things off, so I can, you know, be allowed to see different things on the screen depending on the task that I've been assigned, all right? So to access my layers, I'm going to come up here to Layer Properties, which is on the Home tab under the Layers toolbar here. Okay, I've got this icon, which if I click on it, kind of our large layer tool palette pops up. And you're going to notice we do have a lot of other tools here, which I'll go through. But the main thing now is I want to talk about what's in this layer dialog box here. Okay, we have the status of our layer, which briefly talked about this last week, but a check mark means that's our current layer. Current layer is the layer you're drawing on. And then we have, you know, any other subsequent layers will just be layers existing, you know, organizing items and waiting to be drawn on. We have our freeze thaw. And let me just, I'm going to draw a couple of these, not straight lines, right? Okay. I'm going to create a couple of new layers here. Click, 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 click. I'm just creating brand new layers. And we'll talk about assigning layers in a second, but I'm going to do this without you kind of really knowing how, even though it's not very difficult. Okay. All right. So let's look at layer number 1. All right. So we know that this is not our current layer because it doesn't have a check mark. So we're not going to draw with it if I go out and start like the line command. Okay. If I start the line command and start drawing right now, I'm going to be drawing on layer 0, which we don't want to be doing. This is the name. When I click on new layer, it just by default starts giving default names like layer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. To change this layer name, I click again very slowly, and it will allow me to you know, change the name. So in this case, I could give it whatever name I wanted, but because I'm thinking ahead of, you know, to drawing the basketball court, I'm going to give this layer a name, you know, that would be appropriate for the basketball court. So I'm going to call this one left free throw area. Left free throw. Enter. All right. So the left free throw, when I look at my basketball court, that's a medium pen weight. And again, I'm comparing the outer lines to the throw, you know, the free throw lines to the middle lines. So I've named my layer. I'm going to skip over here to color. I'm going to click on the color. That will allow me to change it. And a medium pen weight, right? If you don't remember, you can always go back to your course booklet. A medium pen weight, it's not going to be color number 1, that's the heaviest. It's not going to be color 8, which is the lightest. It'll be in the middle, so maybe like a color number 4. Okay, so I go back to AutoCAD and I change this to color 4, which is cyan. I hit OK, and by doing that, I just assigned a color to my layer. And in essence, I assigned a pen weight to that layer as well. All right. Going back a little bit, well, let me just say, did you notice it turned cyan magically, right? Ooh, yay! So I've named my layer, I've assigned a color / pen weight, and I want to know a little bit about some of these other things in here, right? So I have the freeze thaw icon right here, and the freeze thaw icon, if I click on it and it turns into a snowflake, I've frozen a layer and it visually turns it off. It's visually turned it off, and when I freeze a layer, if I try and make it a current layer by clicking on it twice very fast, click, click, AutoCAD will say, the layer selected cannot be made current. And it can't be made current because it's frozen, okay? The second that I unfreeze this, which, I thaw it, click, turns back into a sunshine, turns back into a sunshine, there it is again visually, and if I double click on this left free throw, click, click, now that little green check mark shows up next to it, right? So now it's available for me to use, right? Now, freeze thaw, in industry you'll hear the term freeze thaw, you'll hear the term on off, all right? They all mean the same thing, okay? Now I'm just gonna, hold on, let me do something real quick. You all probably have a little light bulb on your layer dialog box. Do you have that? Yeah? Yes? Okay. So out of the box AutoCAD, you'll have a freeze thaw and you'll also have a little light bulb, okay? Freeze thaw, oh, now I can't freeze it because it's the current layer. Freeze thaw will visually turn any layer on or off. Visually turn it off, and it makes that layer so that if it's frozen, you can't draw on it, okay? We also have on off. If I click on off, kind of the same thing happens on the screen, right? It looks like it's turning on and off, right? The difference between these two commands, they kind of do the same thing. They visually turn things, on and off. But the difference between on and freeze and thaw is that when a layer is turned off, right, visually I can't see it, I can still double click on it, click, click, and I can make it my current layer, which means that I can click on the line command and I can start drawing, but nothing is visual. I can't see anything, right? Which this command, that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand where there's a circumstance where you want to be able to draw on a layer but you can't see it, right? Does that make, I can't find a reason why that would be helpful. Because in my experience, it just makes mistakes happen, right? You accidentally use the light bulb, you turn something actually off, you go draw a few lines, and by the time you recognize you've done it, you think, oh, I'll just delete those lines when I turn it back on, and then you get two of them, but you missed a third, and then the contractor thinks that third line is something that it's really not, and something gets billed incorrectly, right? So I think it just really, it opens things up for mistakes in my mind, so I don't really know why they have both of them. So you'll hear the term on, off, freeze, thaw, but if anybody really in industry says turn that layer off, they actually mean freeze it, right? From now on, you'll only use freeze, thaw. You will never use on, off, okay? So to kind of get my head into that mode, I like to right click on this little tab that says on, off, right click, and I like to toggle that off. So it's gone, right? Out of sight, out of mind. And I just like to use the freeze thaw option, okay? I'm going to thaw that layer. Oh, did I have one thing off when I did that? Yes, I did. I'll turn that back on. Oh, see? Look at that mess. Okay, so I'm going to delete that. And, well, I'm going to leave it. Never mind, I'm going to leave it so we can just look at it for a minute. All right, so we have freeze thaw, we had on off, which we don't use. We have lock. Lock will allow you to make a layer uneditable. So if I lock a layer and I locked that left free throw line layer, I'm going to unlock it, click, lock, click. You notice it grays out, right? Now if I select it and I hit delete, it doesn't go away. If I select it and hit M for move, enter, click, click, right? It doesn't, nothing happens. What's that? No, you should not be able to copy it. Nope. What did I just do? Oh. Nope, you can't copy it either. So that layer becomes completely uneditable, right? So this is pretty helpful when you have drawn a floor plan, the design is how you want it, right? And you don't want anybody else to edit it. These lines are perfect, they need to stay where they're at, you can lock them down, okay? So that's locking, unlocking. And it's pretty easy to lock or unlock a layer, right? Yes. Yep, you can use it for reference, you just can't edit it. Yep. We have three more things we're going to talk about here. We have the non-plot option. There's a little printer right here, right? And if you click on that and put a slash through it, that means that you can draw on that layer, that left free throw, okay, which is this line. But if I want to print something, let me just do a quick little print here, right? Okay, preview that. It's not there, right? Visually, it's showing on the screen, that blue line, right? But when I preview a print, it's not there, okay? So that little non-printable, non-plottable option is this setting right here. Click, and it's printable. Click, and it's non-printable, right? And again, you probably are thinking, well, why would you want to draw lines that you don't print, right? There's going to be an instance, and we'll actually talk about it next time, and it's when you plot, right? And it's for a specific thing called a viewport, which we don't want to print, okay? But other than viewports, there are going to be very few layers that you want to have non-printable. Unless maybe you have something like a design option where you've designed a floor plan or whatever, and you wanted to add a wall, but it wasn't maybe approved, but you want to show the client on the screen. You know, there's different things why it might be useful. But in general, you want all of your lines printable, okay? This is probably one of the biggest mistakes beginning students make, because you're going to learn to print pretty quick here, and you're going to create a layer that's non-printable. It's going to be called a viewport layer, right? But one thing that AutoCAD does is when you create a new layer and you give it a certain attribute, right, or a certain setting, and then you create a few more layers, watch what happens, right? It essentially, when you create a new layer, it copies the last layer that was edited. And so if you have a non-printable association there, it's going to create all these non-printable layers, right? And you may not notice it right away. So you draw your whole drawing, you go to print, and then you panic because nothing prints. And you guys, it's funny, but it happens all the time. So this is one of the biggest mistakes that beginning students in AutoCAD make, right? They create all these layers, they do everything right, they go to print, the assignment's finished, and then it doesn't show up, okay? Super easy to fix, but it's a little hard to troubleshoot when you're brand new at this, okay? All right, so I'm just gonna undo all those. Okay, there we go. All right, so we have our freeze thaw, we have our lock unlock, we have our plot, we have our color. You guys all know now how to edit color and what that means, right? We have our line type, and we have our line weight here, okay? Our line type, this is a continuous line. That means that it is continuous and it doesn't have any breaks in it. Although there are several different line types that we use in AutoCAD for different things. So our line weights can be, you know, you can have a dot and a dash, and a dot and a dash, and a dot and a dash, or a dot, dot, dash, dot, dot, dash. You can have dash lines that look like this, right? You can have, I don't know, you can have long lines with dots, whatever, right? And they're all used for different purposes. Or we can have a continuous line that looks like that. Some of these things, you know, some might represent property lines or easement lines or building lines or demolition lines or, you know, different things within a drawing set. A zigzag, you can get, yes, there is a zigzag line type. Maybe for like a fence line or something, right? Or whatever. I guess maybe my point, one of the things to know is that different line types mean different things in AutoCAD, right? So if I draw a line with like a dash in it, like this, it could represent something above me, right? So we're looking at a floor plan, but a dash line might mean, you know, there's a projector above that area, right? A dash line can also mean demolition. So you have a floor plan, but, you know, a couple of the walls are dashed. That means there's, you know, subject to demo. So, you know, line types mean things as you're drafting in AutoCAD. To change your line type, you click on line type and select a line type pops up. Well, there are no other line types in here, but I can click on load, click, and a bunch show up. You're likely going to want to kind of stay with from batting all the way down, well, all the way to the bottom, okay? So there are all of these different line types that are available for you to use. And these ones work a lot better than these up here. So for example, if I wanted this left free throw line to be dashed, or another term for a dashed line in AutoCAD is hidden, or in drafting in general is hidden. So I could come down to hidden, click, OK. Now it's loaded, I click on it, I hit OK, and now that line type shows as hidden, right? So when I zoom in, I see that that line is hidden, Okay, so I know this sounds, again, it sounds funny when we're just talking about this, but to get a line that is dashed, you don't just draw a bunch of little pieces of line segment, right? You assign a line type to the line that appears as if there are, you know, voids in between. I can click on it again. I could hit load, and we could, let's choose zigzag, right? Zigzag, okay. I click on it, I hit okay, and now it's zigzag. That actually, this solves a problem I have in AutoCAD. Glad you mentioned that.
I have a question. So if, you draw multiple line types on one layer, or only one per layer?
One per layer. So I can't assign more than one here. But I could create a new layer that's almost identical in nature and name and give it a different line type.
You should probably copy a layer then.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you create a new layer out of this one right here, I click on new, right? It's going to copy it. Yep. Okay, so we'll leave that. It's kind of fun, right? I've got my zigzag. I've got some different lines here. Now, one thing, and this is a little bit of a tricky deal. Again, we'll blame some of this trickiness on Jeff, but I'll point it out. You have an option over here in the layer dialog box to change the line weight of your layers, okay? This is going to remain default as long, well, and let me just tell, you don't know yet, but when we meet again, we'll talk about printing. And when we print, we're going to use what's called a CTB file. And you don't know what that is yet, but I'm just going to tell you we are going to be using it. And that CTB file makes it so that we don't have to deal with this, all right? Changing line weights here, you will only do that in an office that doesn't use a CTB file, right? And that doesn't make a whole lot of sense now, but it will, okay? We'll talk about that next time. So for our class and for our purposes, this is always going to remain default. And it's going to remain default because we have another way of producing line weights that doesn't make it so that every time we need to change a line weight, we have to change them in our layer dialog box, right? And I'll explain that next time. But when you're first doing this, this sort of makes sense. You hear the term line weight. You hear, you know, different terms about how thick line weights are. You hear 0.5 millimeters, 0.7 millimeters, 0.2 millimeters, right? And if you click on this, you look here and you see, oh, line weights. I've heard that word. Oh, 0.3 millimeters. Oh, I've heard that, or I've seen that written down somewhere, right? So I understand the idea that it's very tempting to change these, but for our purposes, you're never going to change them, okay? And in most offices, you will never have to change these as well, right? Because we're going to do something different with this. So our line weights here, they are going to depend on the color of our lines and then also a CTB file, not changing our line weight within the layer dialog box, okay? And it's actually for your benefit, really. It makes AutoCAD very generic, which makes it easy to use, okay? All right, so we've talked a lot about layers so far. Any questions on layers? Okay, well, let's talk about drawing with some layers. So I'll start drawing the basketball court. That was kind of a long description to get to it. Before I do, I want to show you again, right? We have our layer dialog box here. And I want you to recognize that we have kind of a mini layer dialog box, like a tool palette, sitting up here. So if this tool palette is closed out, close, I still have this little mini tool palette up here. And I can use the down arrow, and I can select a layer to make current, okay? And if I select a layer to make current, that will be the layer that I draw on as I move forward, okay? I have a make current layer, I have a match layer. We have all of the freeze thaw options here, right? I've got isolate, we'll talk about these in a second, unisolate, on off, which we'll not use, but really this is just kind of a shortcut menu for that bigger version, the tool palette, right? So you don't have to have that big tool palette on your screen as you're drafting, okay? Before I do this, I'm gonna add a couple more colors here. So we have our left free throw. The second layer is the right free throw. So let's do layer number 2. We'll try and stay in order. Right free throw. And that one was going to be the same as the left free throw, which is cyan. So we'll click here, we'll choose cyan. And then we have another layer. What is layer number 3? Center jump circle. And that one is going to be a light layer, right? We have the heavy, we have medium and light, and the center jump circle is light. So I'm just looking for that gradient down from cyan, which would be like number 8, which is gray. Hit OK. And then we have border of court, so the border lines for the court. Border of court. And those are going to be a wide pen weight, just looking at the actual assignment itself. And so I'll change that, you know, to color number 1 maybe. And if I had forgotten which pens were heavy, medium, and light, I could just go back to my course booklet, say heavy was pen number 1, right? And I go back here and I say pen number 1 is red. Okay. And we have the, oh, well, that's it. Do not dimension the drawing and assign different colors to each layer. Okay. Well, we're just going to, I guess we have 2 of the same color. We could maybe make one different than the other, but very close. We'll do blue. Okay. So now I have my different layers created, and I have the different colors associated with those layers, right? What's that? Oh, somebody was on that. Who was on that? And it didn't have AutoCAD. We were having to remember that. Was it this class or was it Revit? It was this class. Okay, I forgot. Sorry, that one I guess doesn't have it. We need to remind Jameson maybe. Okay, you might want to sit. Is there another open computer? You know what? I think. Well, I'm gonna link. So it's up to you.
Yeah, I can just watch.
We can link and you can just watch. Yeah. Okay. Well, you're not linking either. We are linked. Are you sure? Can you see another screen okay? Okay, maybe you guys can just share that one. Let me just remind Jameson about that. Hold on. He might be able to find it on here.
This one here was that?
And it's not linking either. Unless that monitor just not turned on now. So that's my side. Okay, so it is linking. There we go.
You know, I didn't hear the letter M when you said linking.
Linking.
You wanted to get in with my own?
Well, we can just do the generic login maybe. Or who do you want to come back and maybe log in here and see?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, that's a bunch of upheaval here. Now that I remember what happened, I think David was able to find AutoCAD on there. Is that right? Hopefully. Okay, I think you're probably good to sit there. Sorry for that. Okay. Can we pull it onto the desktop?
We should be able to. But I'm gonna try that after the class. I'm going to take the time.
Looks like it's working. Thanks, David.
Remember to
Sounds good. Okay. All right. So let's start drawing the basketball court now, right? I've got a few of these layers happening. I'm going to delete all of them. I've created my layers. I've assigned a pen weight. I've named the layers appropriately. I've turned my my drawing to architectural units, right, which makes sense. And so now I want to draw the basketball court.
How do you make it into architectural units?
You can type units and hit enter, and you can change it here. Otherwise, if you have this down here, this little architecture, or it might say decimal down here at the bottom.
Oh, yep.
Yep, you can flip-flop it that way. Decimal architectural, right there. And just to remind all of you, if you draw everything and then you realize that you've drawn all in decimal by accident, right? Decimals are 12 times smaller. Decimal inches are 12 times smaller than the architectural units, so you could scale it up by a factor of 12 and have it be correct.
We'll just make sure to scale before you change to architecture.
Yes, Did you do that on
I did
accident?
that by accident.
Okay, yeah. So when you scale, you're changing from decimal to architectural. So then you have to, yeah. That's a good distinction right there. Okay, so let's draw the basketball court, right? I've got my layers done. Now what I need to do is I need to decide which layer I want to draw on first, right? And so if I have my layer dialog box open, you know, I'm going to draw the boundary first. So I'll do the border of the court, and I'm going to click on it to make it current so that, you know, my current layer is the one I'm going to be drawing on. And I'm going to close out of this. I'm going to hit escape, and you'll see up here that I was successful in making the border of my court, or the current layer, the border of court, okay? If I wanted to change it again, I don't have to go back to the layer property dialog box. I can just drop down and I can choose, you know, center jump circle. Now that's current, okay? But essentially, whichever layer is showing up here is your current layer, and you'll draw on it. So I'm gonna hit escape, and I think I'm gonna use lines to draw this. I could have used rectangle if I wanted, right? Well, actually, no. I've just changed my mind because I'm thinking ahead. I think I'm going to use rectangle to draw this. And the reason I'm going to use rectangle to draw this is because if I use line, I have to use a modification tool that I don't know yet to clean it up a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to use rectangle to draw this. I'm going to click on rectangle. It's on my current layer. I'm going to click to initiate the command. And this rectangle is 56 feet by 96 feet. So I'm going to type at 96 foot, 56 foot, enter, and it drew my court. And I used a relative input, right? So I initiated my first point, click, and then I typed at, right, which says from this first point, you know, 96 foot, comma 56 foot, okay? Now, if I had done that with lines, let me show you why I strayed away from lines, which lines are a great option if you have this other tool available to you, but you guys don't know it yet. So if I would have used lines, I would have drawn, and I'd turn my ortho on, which is F8, 56 foot, enter, 96 foot, enter. And I could have lined these two up, click, click, right? But now, you know, to get that inner rectangle, I want to offset it, this outer line 3 feet. So if I O offset, enter, 3 foot, enter. When they're all separate lines, you see what happens at the corners, right? And I don't have, it's called the trim command. I don't have the trim command available to me to clean that up, right? So instead, I'm going to just use the rectangle because it's one, you know, continuous line. I'm going to offset it, O, enter, 3 foot, enter, click, click, and there is my court. Yep.
I don't know if I did the right thing, but what I did was I measured 3 feet each before I drew, like, because I used single lines. I measured 3 feet from each point.
If it's dimensional, that's fine. It's kind of the long route, right? So you can do that, but it's, yeah, it'll get easier. You'll like, oh yeah, now you look at it, you're like, oh yeah, I could have just offset it, right? But that's totally fine too. Yep. Okay. So next thing I'm going to do is I want to probably draw a free throw line down the center, and so I'm going to change my layer to the center jump circle, L for line, enter, and I'm going to snap to the midpoint, click, click. Yep.
The basketball court is 96 by 56.
96 by 56, yep, yep. Okay, now I'm going to draw that circle in the center, so circle, and I'm going to snap to the center point of that line, click, and I want to do a diameter click, and it is a 4 foot diameter. 4 foot, I could have also typed 48 inches, right? Enter. And the second circle is 12 feet in diameter, so circle again. I can type circle, but I could also just hit enter and reinitiate the circle command that I was just using, right? Enter will reinitiate the command that you had just finished using. I snap to the midpoint or center of that, click, and I want this to be my diameter, click, so let's do 12 foot, enter, right? So I now have my 4 foot circle and I have my 12 foot circle as well. Looks right, somewhat, right? Okay, so what should I draw next? Let's draw, oh, We didn't use the from command last week. Let's talk about the from command. I want to draw those little lines down here. I don't know what they're called formally, right? But I know that, let me just flip up here. These lines right here, right? I know that they're 19 feet off this midline right here, and I know that they're 3 foot long, and I know they're a wide pen weight. Okay. Let me talk about an object snap that is not down here on our object snap toolbar, meaning center, node, quadrant, extension, tangent, right? It's not one of those commands, but it is an object snap, but we haven't learned it yet. It's called from. And what from allows you to do is it allows you to draw a piece of geometry a certain distance from a first piece of geometry. So if I want to draw a little line out here and it's 19 feet from this line right here, that's how I would use the from command, right? I want to draw a line 19 feet from this line over here, all right? So let me show you how to do it a couple times because it takes a couple of times to, you know, kind of get the idea behind it. So I'm going to click on line, and it's going to say specify my first point. Well, my first point is here, click. And then my second point is 19 feet from that first point. So to get the from,
19 feet from the center line?
oh, 19 feet from the center line, you're right, yep, sorry. L for line, enter. Here's my first point, click. Okay, and I want my line to appear 19 feet from, sorry guys, I have to do this in order or I get, let me do it again. Yeah, I did it wrong, sorry. I have to do it in sequence without talking, otherwise I mess myself up. All right, so the from command, line, okay. So I did it, I clicked one time, it was an extra click. So what I'm gonna do first is initiate the from command. So my first point is 19 feet from this middle point. So I'm gonna do shift right click, from this point, click over 19 foot, enter. And that will allow me to draw a line that is 3 foot long. Let me do that again. When I talk during the command, I get lost in it and I don't do it right. Shift right click, from this point, click over 19 foot, enter. Okay, now here's the deal about the from command, right? This very clearly got me 19 feet from this middle line, which is great, right? But you notice, maybe you didn't notice, that, you know, in this instance, it kind of popped me up from the line right there, right? Which is inconvenient. Well, maybe actually, now that I say this, maybe it's because I have dynamic input on, because dynamic input sometimes will interfere with, you know, the angle of the line. Let me try it again. From here over 19 foot, enter. No, it wasn't dynamic input. It still kind of interfered with it. I'm not exactly sure why now, because it didn't used to do that. So maybe it's just the version. There's something weird about it. But you know, the first time I did it, it got right on. The second time I did it, it was slightly above. The third time I did it, you saw it was slightly below. And I didn't really do anything different on any of those moves, right? The nice thing about this is that it gets you generally where it needs to be, right? 19 feet. The bad thing about it is that it was not quite on that line, right? So I still use from all the time, but you just have to be careful to make sure that if it doesn't connect with where it needs to, you kind of move it up and down to get it where it needs to go, all right? So here's what I'm going to do. L for line again, shift, right click. Shift right click, from here, click, and you notice I snapped. Let's see, maybe if I move my mouse over to this end point as if I were going to snap to it, maybe it will keep that line in that plane. 19 foot, enter. Well, that did it easier, so maybe that's the key. Keeping because I have a nearest snap that was along that line, but it didn't keep that second point right on there, right? But the second that I initiated a snap, even though I didn't click on that snap, and even though this line wasn't going all the way there, that somehow kept it a little bit straighter, right? So now I can type 3 feet, 36 inches and get that little line right there. Okay, so maybe that's the answer to the question, right? I'll do it one more time. But this time I'm going to change it to the border of court layer. L for line, shift right click, from the middle point, click over 19 foot, enter, move in the direction I want to go, type 3 foot, enter, and there's my one line. Okay. All right. I'm going to do the same thing over here. L for line, shift right click from the midpoint, click over, and I'll just go to the end. 19 foot, enter. Move my mouse in the direction I want it to go. 3 foot, enter. Okay. Now that I have these two in position, what can I do to create those two identical lines up here? I could copy them, right? So I could grab this, click, whoops, click, click, and I can type copy, right? We know how to copy, click. I can grab the end point, click, pan, pan. Now I want to make sure they go in the exact same spot right above. So I'm going to wait for my perpendicular snap to engage and then click, escape. How nice is that, right? Okay. Now I have a couple of other things I need to generate here. I'll just do one more free throw over here, or whatever this is called. What is this called? I don't know where the hoop is. What is that called? Free throw line? Is that right?
Free throw line is key.
There you go. Right. Let's see. And that's going to be 19 feet from this edge, right? And it's going to be 19 feet long. And then look, do you like how Jeff puts the dimensions on opposite sides? So you have to look back and forth at the plan, right, to figure out what you're doing. These are 12 feet apart. Then I have a line that goes here, and then another circle that is the same distance apart as these lines are apart. Okay. So let's draw one over here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line that is 19 feet long, 19 feet off of this line. So L for line. Oh, I'm going to change my layer no, I'm not going to. L for line, shift right click. From this point, click. We want a line to start 19 foot, enter. We want it to be 19 foot long, right? Now I turn my dynamic input off, so do you notice my input is coming down here at the bottom of my command line here, right? If I had my dynamic input turned on, that would appear at my cursor, okay? So I'm going to type 19 foot, enter. Now this needs to be 12 feet wide, 12 foot, enter. See how it's appearing at my cursor now? I don't even need to measure this. I just need to get close enough to get the perpendicular snap to engage. Click, escape. Right? So if you're thinking, oh, when I'm drawing, I'm not maybe measuring everything, right? I'm kind of using what's there to guide me in drawing. That's perfectly all right as long as it's dimensional. The next thing I need is a circle here. And I have a diameter in that I know these two things are 12 feet apart, okay? But I wasn't necessarily given a dimension on that circle, a radius or a diameter. Let's do radius circle. I'm going to click at the center point, and from there to there is the radius of that circle, 6 foot, right? Click. Okay, but I didn't do it on the right layer because this is heavy, this should be medium, and this should be light. All right, well, how do I change my layer colors, right? Once I've established some geometry with a layer associated, how do I change it? There you go, right? I can select all those items. I can use this drop down, and I can change it to whatever layer it needs to be on. So this is the right free throw. Click, escape, escape. Okay, and I'm going to let you guys draw this one over here. I'm not going to take the time to do it, but I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to ooh, can't you wait till we learn that command, right? A little bit less drawing. It must be that, are you guys a little tired today? Okay, so if I want to change this one, this is the left free throw. So I look down, where's my, did I create, yes I did. Left free throw, there we go. Okay. All right, so I have, that looks like everything. So that's what you want right there, yep.
So from the right free throw and the left free throw, are they the same borderline?
Okay.
Are they the same?
No, they're well, if you did them the same, I wouldn't take points away, but the assignment says to do them 2 different colors. So it's okay. I'm fine with you doing the same because I think you know, obviously this assignment was written so that you would, you know, get used to different layers and colors and things. So, but it's okay. All right. So that's the assignment, right? Let's say I'm going to show you a couple other things with layers before we are, you know, done with this part. But, you know, again, I want to remind you that we have the on-off, which we're not going to use. We have the freeze-thaw. Now, the freeze-thaw through the layers dialog box here, right? That works where I can click on that and it freezes and thaws. Great. Well, up here in the shortcut menu, freezes the layer of selected objects. So, you know, the workflow is a little bit different when you're using these shortcut icons. So if I click on freeze, it's going to say, hey, you know, great, you want to freeze something, show me what you want to freeze. Well, I want to freeze this gray layer. Okay, click, and it freezes it, right? Instead of going through the layer dialog box and clicking freeze thaw, I'm clicking freeze thaw here and then freezing it by selecting it. I'm going to, I think we have turn all layers. Nope, freeze, thaw all layers. There we go. Sorry, I was looking for the right one. So I froze that middle line, right? That middle area. And then when I want to get it back, I want to thaw it. I can click on thaw all layers and it turns everything back on. So to freeze, I click on freeze. I click on what I want to freeze. Click, click. And as long as it's not the current layer, it will freeze, right? I hit escape. And if I want to turn those back on, I come up to thaw, click, and they thaw. Okay. I can lock layers the same way. So if I want to lock something, I click on the shortcut, I click on the object, click, and it freezes it, or sorry, locks it. So now it's uneditable, right? And if I wanted to unlock it, I could choose unlock layers, click on that layer again, and it unlocks it. Okay. I have make layer current. My biggest pet peeve in Revit and sometimes in AutoCAD when it has to do with layers is that in a real project you get hundreds and hundreds of layers. And not only are they your layers, but they're consultant layers. So you have structural engineer, mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, civil engineer, right? You have interior design, you have the architect's layers. And so you start to get this giant list of layers that when you want to draw something, you have to search all the way through it to find the layer that you want, right? So AutoCAD kind of got smart to that people don't like searching through hundreds of layers to find what they need. And we have a make current layer. So what that means is I can select an object and say, I just want this, you know, center jump circle layer, but I can't find it, right? If I click on it and I choose make current, click, it makes that center jump circle current. So instead of going and finding that layer, I can select it, make it current, and then draw, right? It makes the workflow a lot quicker. I can use match layer. So instead of me saying, you know, I want this whole thing to be on the red layer, selecting everything very carefully and then dropping down and changing, I have match layer, which will allow me to click, and down at the command line it says select the object you would like to choose as your matching, click, and now anything I touch, click, 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 click. Oh wait, I did it wrong. Sorry, let me start that over. Match, click, enter. Now anything that I touch, no, hold on, what is going on? To be changed. Ooh, they have well, that's odd. They've changed it a little bit.
You select everything and then push the match layer, or select what you want and then push match layer, then
Is it match layer? Select object on destination layer. Well, that is completely opposite of what it used to be. I don't like that at all. So let me just tell you the way. And so in 2017, it's like this. You type MA or match layer. You click the one that you like. So if I want to make everything red, I'd click on red, and then I would go around just clicking, and it would match to red, right? So now you have to match layer, click, select the object, enter, and pick its destination, which is the gray, and it switches to gray. That doesn't make any sense. Huh. Okay, well, you can use that if you want. I'm going to boycott it. It's in ARC now. Match layers is now in the ARC category. That makes me not want to switch from 2017. That one command makes me not want to switch from 2017. It made it really easy because you could, I mean, if you get used to it, it's probably just as easy, but you could click on one layer and then blanketly go around clicking on things and it would match that layer, right? And as much as I'd like to say it's best for you to, pick the layer, then draw, it, for me, I get drawing and then I think, oh, I haven't changed these to the right layer. So I stop working and then I pick a bunch of things and I change them to the right layer and then I move on. And I, hopefully get things on the right layer the first time, but it doesn't always happen, right? So there's a lot of manipulation of layers, and that match layers made it a lot easier, I feel like, in the other direction, that the way it used to work to do things. Well, actually, you know what? Let's do match properties. Hold on a second. Let's try this. Maybe this is the one I'm looking for. They've given it a new name, or they made match layer function differently than match properties. Interesting. Okay. So we'll use match properties instead. That just kind of refreshed my memory. Let's see what the shortcut for it is. Hold on. Match prop. MA. Match prop. Okay. This is a much easier way of going about it. So this is what this is the command I was. So this used to function like that, but now it doesn't look like it does. So match properties will allow you to take any object and match it to another, not just layers. So match properties will allow you to change text and dimensions and blocks and really anything. Hatch, it will allow you to match one to the other, right? So it was sort of like the idea of match layer, except that it was more universal, right? I could match anything to any other object. So let's use match properties instead. MA, or match properties. I click on the initial object I want to match. Click, click, click. See, that's much easier. That workflow is much easier, right? So if I accidentally create something on the wrong layer, MA, enter, click, click. I could just go about changing things as I want them to be. Much better. Okay. I'm going to hit undo because they're not right at that point. But that's how you're going to work through your basketball court. No dimensions. You don't need to worry about text or anything. We obviously don't know how to, do any of that. All right. Any questions so far? Okay. All right. Well, we have, let's see, there's 2 other things I want to talk about today. Well, yeah, 3 other things I want to talk about today. I want to talk about layer naming, right? Professional standards with regards to layer naming. I want to talk about a template assignment, and then we'll talk about the AIA layer assignment that you also have. Okay, so you'll work on this assignment. If you've already submitted it, just resubmit it over the top of the other one. That's completely fine. But make sure you get your layers in there, right? When I grade these, again, I look for dimensional correctness. I look to make sure that everything is there. I make sure that you have at least picked up on the idea that we have a heavy, medium, and light layer, right? It may be red, or it might be blue or green, but there's a variation between heavy, medium, and light, right? So those are things I'm going to be looking for. That you have straight lines, of course. So pay attention to those items. Let's talk about layer naming professionally, and then I'm going to talk about the template assignment, okay? All right. Let me find the page I want to in here. Okay. So in your booklet, let's see, on page 1-53, I'm going to go all the way home, view, rotate, 1-53. Okay. In your book here, we have AIA CAD layer naming conventions. So it goes from here. We have a couple pages. We have a big extensive list of these, right? And the point of this is, I think that, right now it's kind of hard to recognize how involved layer naming or layers get in professional drawings, but they can get really, really extensive. And you could have hundreds of layers in a drawing, okay? And so, a bunch of people got together and formed a, I'm going to say committee, something, called the National CAD Standard, right? They got together and they unified all, they have a set of standards that, generally most people or disciplines that have something to do with architecture or engineering, they comply with, right? And it just makes everything uniform. It makes it easy to navigate. At first, it's a little bit hard to get used to, but you'll get used to it really quickly, right? But essentially what they did is they standardized a naming convention for layers. So you know who drew them and you knew what they are, okay? When you are working professionally, this is how you are going to see layers named, right? So instead of calling a layer just something like wall or door or window, right? You're going to see a format like a-wall-part-demo, right? And again, it sounds pretty complicated right now, but you'll be talking AutoCAD speak pretty soon, right? And using this language that we formed to identify with or to tell other people about layers. So in our, let me just switch back over here to our basketball court, right? So if I were to, number one, create a layer, I would go up to Layer Properties, and I would click on New Layer, which we talked about last time. Click New Layer. And if I wanted to name that layer and I wanted it to be a wall layer, I would capitalize and I would call this A-wall, right? And I'd hit enter, and then I would give the wall a certain pen weight, okay? Not only has the National CAD Standard, NCS, given us a layer naming convention, they've also assigned pen weights to those. So you can look on their website or whatever and say, oh, A-wall is, an architectural wall designation, and that maybe has a red pen weight associated with it, right? A number 1. Okay, so let's look at this layer naming convention. It's exciting. Let me talk about first what all of these different abbreviations mean. We have the identifier or the discipline code, right? So A for architecture, SE or S for structural. You'll see A as AE a lot of times. EE for electrical engineering, CV for civil. So each of the different disciplines that you're working with has a designator or discipline code, and it's pretty evident, right? ID for interior design. So in the case of architecture, you would have A or AE as your discipline code. You have a dash. Then you have a 4-letter descriptor, which is the major group of the item you're layering. So if you are generating walls, right, and it's a wood wall, the major group or description would be wall. So A, architectural, dash, 4-letter descriptor for the major category, wall, dash, the minor category, which describes it, wood, it's another 4-letter descriptor. And if we have a specific status that it needs to represent, then you would then add another dash and then the status field. So is it demo? Is it new? Is it existing to remain? Is it, future, right? You never knew there were so many different phases in architecture. But that is what this sort of syntax identifies, right? A architectural wall, it's a partial height wall, and it's to be demoed, essentially. And so you have all of these in your layer dialog box, and regardless of what layer you're using, you know what it represents, okay? So it's pretty hard to get used to this. When I remember this really specifically because when I was in school, we had somebody in our class. They got really not excited, but they had a lot of motivation, and they created a CAD file with every single one of these in there, and then just like let everybody have it. So we had all the layers created for everybody in the class, which was kind of nice, right? Which I'm not totally against, right? You have to do all your own drawing work and stuff, but I don't mind if you maybe collaborate on something like that. That which was excessive, right? We don't really need to have all these layers for what we're doing right now, but that person wanted to do it. But here's a good list of probably the most common layers you're going to be using for our class, right? So we look here. Oop, let me go down a little bit. A-floor IDEN, room numbers. A, floor handrails. You're like, well, what does floor have to do with handrail? Well, it's an item that is built on the floor, right? So A, floor handrail. A, glazing full. We call windows glazing in architecture. So you'll hear the term glazing all the time. This is a full height glazed wall. Roof, A-roof. A ceiling, A ceiling grid, A ceiling pattern, A ceiling suspended, right? Suspended elements. Like we have these suspended lights in here, right? Equipment, flooring. Let's see, what are some other odd ones? These are all pretty straightforward. Oh, anno. We have annotation. So all of your dimensions, all of your text, different annotation items like keynotes and legends and borders and notes and things like that, they go in an annotation layer, right? It's a lot to kind of think about right now, and you'll kind of ease into the idea of using these, but you know, this is kind of the way that you go about it. You don't have to know all of them. You just have to know how the system works, and if there's something that you have to create that is sort of different from the rest, you at least know how to go about it, right? So if you run into something weird, like you have a wood wall, but it's, you know, I don't know, like a wing wall that doesn't hit the floor but doesn't hit the ceiling, right? There's not really a layer in here that talks about that. But you know that it's an A, you know that it's a wall, and you know that you could describe it like with a wing, W-I-N-G, and somebody might then say, oh, it's a wall. I don't maybe know what wing means, but I know that it's a wall, and I can go ask that person what wing is, although maybe I could sort of surmise what that is, right? So just get used to it. Let me just say it now, right? Just get used to it because this is what you'll be seeing in AutoCAD for the rest of your life, right? Any questions about naming? Okay. Let me just, I'm going to switch back to my AutoCAD file here, right? And when we created this file, you were given layers to create, right? And they had specific names. So border of court, center jump circle, left free throw line, right free throw line. Great, right? But what if I wanted to create some layers according to the AIA layer naming conventions, right? I would go here and I would type, you know, A dash wall dash wood, right? And I'd come over here, I'd click on the color, and I would click on whatever color those walls were. And then when I wanted to create another one, I would A dash door dash maybe something like 36 inches. And I'd give my door layer name or color, maybe color number 3, right? So when you start a new project, there are several things you need. You need to open the drawing, you need to save it, you need to make sure it's in the right units, you need to turn maybe, you know, in the background back here, I have a grid. Maybe I want to turn that on and off, right? I'm going to turn it off for now. So save it, you want to turn have the correct units. You want to have some layers generated so that when you go to draw, you have everything on the right layer, right? And I say this because, you know, when you have an assignment, a lot of times you don't just sit down and start your assignment. There's some prep work, right? You have to create your layers. You have to set your units. Eventually, we'll have text and we'll have dimensions and we'll have title blocks and blocks. And so kind of the list of things that you need to start an assignment are starting to grow, right? Which is going to lead into our next assignment. So I'm just kind of prepping you for that, right? And layers is going to be one of those things. You're going to need to prep your layers before you start an assignment from now on, right? But this is how you'll go about creating those layers. Yep.
So if you're going into architecture, and there's something to that, but everything that you do, is it going to be the A dash whatever, even if it's like, say, like the electrical different, okay.
Yeah, so what this layer naming convention does too is it establishes responsibility, right? So you as an architect may say, well, I want to design the lighting, but I still need an electrical engineer to check it, to make sure it's code compliant, and to put the actual fixtures where they need to be, right? So what you will do is you will draw architectural lighting plans so that you can say, this is my design intent, and you'll use A layers to do that, and then the engineer will come in and they will say, great, we see your design intent, now we will actually draw the official electrical plan with E layers.
And so they'll go and throw their E layers onto your
Yeah, you go back and forth. Yep. Okay, so hopefully this makes a little bit of sense. The system isn't terrible. You'll get used to it. You won't like it very much at first, but you'll get used to it. Okay. I see layer creation in your future, right? I see layer naming in your future, right? All right. Any questions on layers naming? No, not yet. You guys get the idea that layers really mean pen weights, right? Okay. Let me bring up one other thing. This is going to be part of an assignment that you're going to have to do, but I just want to explain it because I feel like it's not deceitful, but it's a little misleading, so I'm going to point it out. Let's see here. Okay, so you're going to have an assignment, and it's called the template assignment. It's on page 2-15 of your booklet. So let's go down here. It's this assignment, okay? So, of course, you have the basketball court, which we've done in class, so you all should be able to, you know, start and finish that. You're going to have 2 assignments this week to do. One's going to be the template assignment, and the second one's going to be called AIA CAD layers, right? When I was talking about there are going to be things from now on that you have to do every time you want to start an assignment, this template assignment is going to kind of make it easier for you to do that, all right? A template is essentially, or a template in AutoCAD, and we'll be working on this over the course of the semester. It won't just be this assignment and we will never use it again. What we're doing with this template assignment is we're setting up an AutoCAD file with things contained in it that we use for every single assignment, so that, you know, we create it one time in this one file, and every time we need to use it, it's there when we start an assignment, okay? So this template, the idea of a template is that I go into an AutoCAD file and I create layers and I set my units, you know, and eventually I'll add dimensions and I'll add text styles and I'll create a bunch of system settings, right? And I'll save this file and I'll close it. And then when I go to draw an assignment, instead of opening up a blank file, right, that has nothing in it, I'll open up my template file and it'll have layers and dimensions and text and a bunch of settings in there, so that I don't have to recreate those every single time I want to start an assignment, right? Does this kind of make sense? The idea of a template? Okay. This template file in AutoCAD is different than our working drawings files, right? We talked about that maybe one of the first days of class, where we have several different file extensions in AutoCAD. We have the DWG file, we have the DWT, and we have the DXF file, right? This right here, that's the template file. Okay, this is our working file. And this is our exchange file. Okay. So the idea behind this assignment is that when I open up AutoCAD to complete an assignment, and I'm just going to close this, I don't have to spend 30-40 minutes creating layers and setting all my settings in order to start working. I can open a file, it has everything I need in it, and I just hit save and I begin my work, right? And I don't have to do anything else. Templates, you notice right here we have some templates in AutoCAD that we can use. Although these ones are not super useful to us because they don't have our layers and our settings in them. But, you know, for example, oh, I've got one there. I created this last semester probably. Probably doesn't have anything in it. Oh, no, it has one layer. Right? But when I open that, that's my file. It has my name on it, and it has all of my layers and different personal settings in it that I like to start an assignment. Okay? So our template file, you know, from now on, after you create it, especially if you're working off your own laptop, your own computer, once you create it, it will live in your computer so that when you go to start your assignment, you have it there to start with. Okay? I'm going to compare this really quick. Let me open up Revit. AutoCAD hasn't really effectively done this yet, and I think they haven't put any templates that will help you in there because they're so universal. So many different professions use AutoCAD, right? And not just in architecture, in engineering and other places. Where Revit is a little bit more tuned towards either an architecture firm, you know, at least Revit architecture, an architecture firm, or maybe a contractor, right? And so, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. And so what Revit has done is you'll notice they have an architectural template set up here, right? When I open up the architectural template, right, I have things comparable to AutoCAD, like if I wanted to draw a wall, oop, come on, there we go. I have some walls already defined, right? So this would be similar to layers, right? I have walls defined. If I want to insert a component, which is similar to a block in AutoCAD, I have not a whole lot, and they've chosen weird ones, but I have a few different components I can insert in here, right? If I want to create some lines, I have some line types already created, okay? And a lot of my symbols and tags in here are already defined. So Revit got kind of smart and they said, oh, hey, yeah, you know, nobody ever likes to start from scratch, so we're going to inherently build some of these things into our architectural template file, right? Where AutoCAD has not done that yet. Okay. I don't know. I don't know. I would think that if they were, they would have already done it, because Autodesk owns Revit and AutoCAD now, you know, and so I don't know why they wouldn't have. I guess you can get more templates online. Actually, now that I look there, let's see what they have online. Maybe we can find something good. Let's see. Architectural Imperial with typical settings for architecture. Well, let's look there. Let's open that. Watch this be like the best thing ever. Okay, so they have set this up with, I guess, quote, common architectural features, which include having a title block in their paper space with some attributes built in. That's helpful. But I think, so they've turned their grid off. They have it set in architectural units, right? That's pretty helpful. The main thing that I feel like is helpful, but they don't have in here is, I guess, the layers, right? That would be one helpful thing to kind of maintain in here. So it doesn't really look like they've done that, unless there's something else.
Could you go off of that template though, and edit that template, and then save that?
Yeah, you could. Yeah.
Because it already has the things that are helpful.
Yeah, you could. Let's see if, let me look real quick here. They have a few, well, those aren't, that might be useful to us later on. I was going to say there's not a whole lot that's benefiting you, but there are a couple things. So like this is going to be maybe useful for you in the future. Let me look here. That's not going to be super useful, but you've got one text style. Okay. Yeah, if you wanted to, you could start. It's not going to get you very much ahead though, honestly. And I'm going to have you draw your own title block that looks different than the one in here. So it's whatever you want to do, right? All right. So I guess in looking at that, there's not something that's maybe going to get you completely ahead, right? So you still have to do the assignment. But essentially what you're going to do is on page 2-15 is the template assignment. And you're going to do this one first. And the idea behind this is to create that template with, you know, layers right now, because we only know about layers and units and the grid maybe, right? You're going to build those things into it so that when you go to start other assignments, you already have them, okay? The next page, this shows you the layers that you want to put in that template file. So you're going to change your units. You're going to turn the UCS icon off. Let me show you what that means. It means that, see how terrible that little icon is? You can turn it on or off. I prefer it off, so that's why I didn't write this assignment, but that's, you know, turning that off. And it says create the following layers with associated colors. An assignment layer, a anno text, a anno title block, the temp layer, and let's add these layers in there as well. All right, so you're going to add these layers, plus you're going to add these layers in there. All right, load the hidden border, dashed, and divide line types. Right, does everybody remember what that means? When I go to layer properties, we're just going to load those so that they're available here for us, so that when we need to use them, we can very quickly pick them. Okay, so we're going to load those in. We're going to turn the grid and snap on grid and snap on the status bar. So if you don't like the grid, which I don't like the grid, down here, we're going to turn these things off. Do you see what's happening there, right? This one next to it, the snap, we'll just have that turned off as well. Okay, save this file as a template file, right? So we're going to add all of these settings, we're going to add these layers, and then you're going to save it so that later on, when you start an assignment, you have that available to you. So I'm going to delete this. Okay. To save this as a template file, save as, and we're going to save it wherever we want to save it. You know, I could go to my desktop. The difference between this file, saving this file, and a regular DWG file is that we're going to make this a template file. So I'm going to change this from AutoCAD DWG extension to DWT, right? See that DWT? And now AutoCAD says, oh great, you want to save a template file? Well, this is where we save template files, right? And you'll notice that I have my SB template already right there. So this means that if you save your template file right here and it's on your computer, whenever you hit start, your template will be in that list of template files for use, which makes it really convenient, right? So I could name this SB template again, hit save, hit OK here, and I've just saved a template file, right? So now when I go to start an assignment, you know, I don't click on this start drawing, and I don't start up a, well, okay, that was a bad example. Let's just open up the blank one, okay? I don't just open up a blank one because now I have to set my units, turn the grid off, open up the layer dialog box, and add a bunch of layers. I don't do that, right? When I want to start a brand new file now, I go to my drop-down template, I choose SB template, and it has my layers. The grid is turned off, my UCS icon is turned off, and I'm ready to start drawing my assignments, okay? So I've got all of these wonderful things now that I have available. So it's really a time saver, and it also really helps you with errors, right? If you do it once right, you know, it's correct and it works, and you know, that saves you from doing it incorrectly kind of on the fly and making, you know, mistakes. Any questions about that assignment?
Where was that second page of extra stuff you said you wanted?
It's the page right after it. So there's that template. The next page are these layers. Now, one thing, it's not really, again, it's not tricky, but it just makes you think, right? So create these layers. Dims, that's a dimension layer. So when you create dimensions, you put dimensions on dimension layers. Line weight, 0.35 millimeters. That always messes everybody up because you think, well, 0.35 millimeters, what does that mean? We're using colors, right? Okay, well, let me just point something out. And I think, you know, Jeff was pretty tricky. Down here at the bottom of this color line weight chart, for every pen, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, there's also a thickness associated with those, right? So when I say I want this layer to be 0.35 millimeters, that means it's going to be pen number 3, which is, I have to go to my layer dialog box, right? Click. Pen number 3 is green, essentially. So that's what you need to kind of correlate those 3 items, right? This is where I said, oh, you say 0.35 millimeters, you know, you're looking for 0.35 millimeters, and most beginning students find it right here. But then you remember, wait, she said, don't change that, but I don't see 0.35 millimeters anywhere, right? So that's, I just wanted to clarify that in this booklet, you know, it says, create this layer on 0.2. Okay, well, 0.2 is pen number 5. Right? And when I go to AutoCAD, pen number 5 is blue. Okay? So that's what you're going to be doing with those. All right? So first assignment is that template assignment where you will do all of the instructions on page 215, and then the page after where maybe those 8 different layers, create those layers and add them. Okay? And then AIA CAD layers is your second assignment. So let me go back to that. Oh, did I close out Canvas? Dang it. Let me go back to Canvas here. There we go. We are 1310. Let's go to assignments here. Template file, and then AIA CAD layers. And I wanted to show you this one specifically too because you're going to need a file from the CAD Common to start this file. And it's called aialayers.dwg, and it's right here. So I don't want you to panic when you get home and it says start with this file. It's right here in the assignment, okay? For this assignment, you'll be required to complete the following drawing found in your course packet. The assignment instructions are in the course packet. But essentially, you're going to be creating some layers again, and it's going to be those layers that are on page 2-16. So you're going to put those in your template. This assignment, you're going to do double duty because you don't know how to transfer those layers to a file that doesn't have them, right? You know how to open up a template and use it, but you can't transfer back and forth, so you're going to do it twice, which I feel like is good practice. So you're going to create these layers for a second time, just this once, and you are going to assign them to the objects in this file. So if I open this file, AIA layers, it opens this up. The assignment is to go in your layer properties dialog box, create all the appropriate layers, and then assign them to the objects in here, right? So you're going to create a layer called A-wall, and then you're going to assign the walls to that layer. You're going to create a stair layer, and then you're going to assign these lines to that layer, okay? Does that make sense so far? Okay. So those are going to be our 2 assignments, and they're due, I think they're due next Tuesday. Okay. And if, again, just like today, if you had questions on them, we can do some of it in class to help maybe your understanding. Before I stop, I'm going to stop recording, but I want to tell you about a couple things.